happens what happens in our course is like we have created a 45-day structured plan where we focus on the front end part, the back end, and the API handling with the database and deployments. What we do in our first week is like first week we'll be concentrating on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, we
Okay.
start from zero. You learn how websites are structured using HTML, styled with CSS, and made dynamic using JavaScript. Okay. Think of it like there is a this website. The whole structure of the website depends on HTML. The whole styling, whatever you see in the UI, is dependent on CSS, and all the functionalities, how you work, and like what if you click something, what opens. If you click something, what to where it redirects. Everything is handled by JavaScript. Okay, so we'll be learning about these three things in our first week. And coming in the second week, what we will be usually doing is like we'll be learning about React JS. Okay, as we move to React, it's like a powerful JavaScript library, and it is used by companies like Facebook and Netflix. What's an advantage with React is like React makes it easy to build large apps by splitting the UI into smaller components. That's like the basic functionality or advantage when it comes to React. Okay, and then we'll also be learning about routing for multiple pages in React. We'll also be learning about forms and state management. The state management refers to like the context API in Redux. All these things and the basic and advanced concepts we'll be learning over a week. In the second week, by the end of week 2, you will build and deploy. You will be able to build and deploy your first React app. On week 3 and week 4, we'll be focusing on backend with C#, .NET Core, and Web API. What happens is like we'll switch gears to the server side for the week 3 and week 4. First, you learn C# language, and behind .NET, like it's an object-oriented and modern approach, right? All the things with C# and .NET. So we'll be using that. We'll start with variables, loops, classes, and OOPS concepts. Then we'll be moved to building web apps using .NET Core and MVC architecture. This what happens on the whole of week 3. We'll be learning about C# basics and advanced concepts. Then we'll be moving on to building small web apps and using .NET Core and MVC architecture. For the week 4, what we used to do is like to integrate the front end and back end. We'll be learning about how we can build REST APIs to form the bridge between the front end and back end. You'll also learn about there is this thing called CRUD operations: create, read, update, and delete. So we'll be learning about CRUD operations.
Bro,
Hello, hello.
yes, you can go through.
Okay, fine. After we'll be after about CRUD operations, we'll be learning about authentication part in the APIs. We'll be learning about testing APIs using Postman application. Will be, and finally, like at the end of the 4th week, we'll be connecting your API with some React app which you might have developed in week 2. Okay, that's how we planned the things. For week 5, we'll be learning about databases and entity framework. Okay, we'll dive into the SQL Server to store and manage data, and then we use entity framework core to work with databases in C#. And as we'll be working on entity framework core, we'll be using LinkU widely, and we'll also learn about data migrations, repository patterns, performance optimization. Performance optimization is the thing, lazy loading versus eager loading. We'll be learning about them. And after week 5, we'll be concentrating on deployment and cloud. The final stretch is all about preparing you for the real world. Okay, what happens is like you might have created a front end project, like a front end application. You might have created a back end application, and you have created APIs to connect front end and back end. Okay, all these things you will be completed in 5 weeks. For the 6th week, what we will be doing is like we'll be deploying APIs and front end to Azure cloud, and then we'll be working with Docker for the containerization of our whole project, and then we set up the CI and CD pipelines. That's continuous integration and continuous development pipelines with GitHub Actions. Like GitHub Actions is an application which we can develop the pipelines, and we can add some OAuth logins with Google or Facebook for our application, and we'll use Redis for caching, all that things. We'll even do testing, like the code reviews and all. We'll be doing that. Okay, what happens over here is like that's by the end of the whole course, you'll be well equipped with a complete project which you can showcase in your GitHub profile. Okay, there would be a project which has a beautiful front end and a working back end with all the APIs and all, and everything would be sent up live in using cloud and all. Okay, you understood, right, what I'm talking about right now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now let me come to the topics, like the basic or the any topics which we'll be learning about. In like I'll break right. Previously, I just talked about weeks, right? We have talked about 5 to 6 weeks how we'll be working on. Now let's just talk about day wise. Okay. The first day which we'll be having is like you will be learning about HTML basics, the introduction to web development, of how the HTML document structure of an HTML document is. We'll be learning about HTML tags and elements. There is this concept called semantic HTML. We'll be learning about that. Then on day 2, we'll be moving on to CSS basics. CSS usually adds styling to our website. So we'll be learning about introduction to it and the selectors. There are many properties and models in CSS. I will be learning about that. There is this concept called CSS units. Like there are different types of units, like how we have centimeters, meters, and kilometers. In CSS also there are different types of units. We'll be learning about that. We'll also be learning about different types of positioning in CSS. All these things, what happens is like it would help us create a beautiful UI or create a beautiful styling for our website. Okay. On the day 3, we'll be moving on to the advanced CSS concepts. There are these media queries for responsive design, like the carousels or the playing of any other YouTube video in our website. All those things. The media queries are completely a different set of things. So we'll also be learning about CSS variables and inheritance, which are like it's like a programming language, but it's not a programming language. Variables and inheritance. We'll be adding multiple things in a single class, and we'll be using that. One second. Okay, and there is this another concept called SESS, which we use when we are working. Usually, when people are using Angular framework, they tend to use SESS. We'll also be learning about that, like how variables nesting works in SESS. There is a slight difference between CSS and SESS. We'll also be knowing about that. For the day 4 and day 5, we'll be learning about JavaScript basics and advanced concept. We'll be starting from the introduction to variables, data types, operators, the whole functions and scopes concept, like global and local scopes, everything. For the these are all for the basics part of the JavaScript. Then we'll be moving on to advanced concepts in JavaScript. There are these advanced concepts in JavaScript called event listeners and event delegations. It's a concept where we'll be learning about things like how an event in the sense just a click. It might be a click, or it might be you hovering your mouse pointer on something. Okay, we'll be uh, JavaScript basically means adding functionality to our website, right? We'll be talking about the how the functionality works, like how we can create new functionalities in our website so that our whole UI might look better and more functional. We'll be talking about that. Then there is this ES6 features like the arrow functions, spread operators, and destructuring. These are all the concepts which will be you need to know when we are using JavaScript ES6 plus. So we'll be learning about them. Then there is this function called async and await. We'll be learning about that. Then on the day 6 and day 7, we'll be learning about DOM manipulations. There is this data object model, which is like a tree concept, like how we can get element by ID, how we can get element by name, how there is this thing called query selector. We can select query from our functions, and how we can modify elements using inner text, inner HTML, class list, all these things. These are all the DOM. We call this as DOM manipulation. Okay, and there, as I said, right, there is event listeners and event delegations. In this, on this day, we'll be learning about event handling. There are many events like on click, on input, on change, on hover. Well, the event, as I just said, event is something which you would be doing in a UI. Okay, as I said, it might be clicking on some button or hovering on some carousel or hovering on some block of UI. Everything comes as an event. So we'll be learning about how we can handle those events. Like if we are talking about on click, if you click on something, how you want the UI to react, like how you want the UI to show, you will be using that. On input, like if you try and input something in a block of form, how you want the UI to react, so you would be doing that. Okay, and the last day of the week one, we'll be learning about fetch API and JavaScript functionalities for the HTTP requests. Okay, how we can use the fetch APIs, how we can use the JSON parsing and stringifying, so that if we get any metadata or something, how we can configure them in our backend. So if you are getting data from front end, how you can configure them in your backend using the JSON parsing and stringifying. Okay, and we'll also be learning about, as JavaScript is a bit complex, we'll also be learning about how we can handle errors and how we can debug. Okay, then moving on, the week two is completely out based on React.js framework. Okay, first we'll be learning about what React is, how the JSX syntax would be, and what the different types of React components. Basically, React components are two types: functional and class components. We'll be learning about them, the difference between functional and class components, and we'll be learning about how we can render elements in the React. And for there is this another concept in React, like props and state. You might have been knowing about that. That's like a bit important topic, like how we can understand props, like how props work, and how the state management is done using use state function, use state hook. And there is this another, like as I said in JavaScript, the same event handling will also be there in React. The same on click, on submit, on hover, everything. So we'll also be learning about them in React. And then we come into some important part in React, like think of it as an advanced concept, the React hooks and lifecycle methods. These are advanced concepts as well as basic concepts. Like you need to know these things if you want to excel in React. And these are also a bit advanced when it comes to the whole structure and the whole uh, library. When we talk about the whole library of React, okay, we'll be learning about different types of React hooks and different lifecycle methods which we have in React. Okay, these like these would take around 1 or 2 days if we go in depth while learning about this. And after that, we'll be moving on to how we can set up the React router, React routing, how we can use the navigation with link, and there is a function called use navigate, how we can imply that in our web application. And then there is this another thing called dynamic routing. So we'll also be learning about dynamic routing, how that works and all. Then we will be moving on to React Forms. React Forms is not much of a concept. Like it's a you know about forms, right? You would have seen multiple types of forms in some web applications, in bank applications and all. We'll be learning about them, how we can develop them using React. And then there is this concept called control components and uncontrolled components. We'll be learning about that. We'll be learning the difference between that. We'll be learning how we can apply that in our web application, the different types of application it has and all. And for the React forms, we'll also be need to worry about, like learn about form handling and form validations. Form handling and form validations, these would be covered in the JavaScript part of our course itself. but we'll take a small revision of that, and we'll add some concepts which are different from the basic JavaScript to the advanced